But we all know what the year 2011 brought to our state, 62 tornadoes, and this one in particular, you see a lot of this when it moved through Tuscaloosa. A lot of cameras were in place at the time. This was from the downtown area as this all unfolded. Our very own meteorologist Fred Hunter, and we're going to hear his story coming up, was at the Tuscaloosa EOC office, at Emergency Management Office, took a direct hit off of Colusa Avenue, and as we tracked this, we had the storm tracker on 15th Street. Just looking at the video, you can see that tornado. This is what we saw that day as we panned the camera and we had on the tower building downtown. You can see right there as it moved through Tuscaloosa. That's crossing near Stillman College, and I'm just kind of moving this through quickly so you can see the tornado. What was interesting, there were all these vortices you could see spinning around the tornado, and I remember the one in 2000, and at the time when we were watching this move through downtown, all I could think of was just how surreal this was, and thinking of folks that I knew in the path of this, and texting and trying to help spread the word, and we were just naming every location we could think of to help alert folks as we were seeing this move through downtown. That's Greensboro Avenue right there through Tuscaloosa. There's a courthouse, and you can see where this tracked. That is right there off of 359 and at 15th Street. This is when it moved across Greensboro and tracked. We saw all the damage down 15th Street, and this was past, I believe this was near 359 there as it crossed and continued there through Tuscaloosa. I remember at the time we were showing areas in the path of this, and we could see Alberta City and the Midtown area. But the Rosedale area that's what I was trying to think of, was heavily impacted as it moved through that part of Tuscaloosa. We saw the damage, and you can see all the power flashes, and eventually, well, what happened as it moved on through Tuscaloosa, we lost power. But that's what we saw that day, just one of many tornadoes that moved through Tuscaloosa. Here are all of the tracks. We had the one tornado that moved through Vance earlier in the day in the Coker area. There was also at the time, we were tracking the one through Tuscaloosa, another major tornado that moved through Hale County. Again, these are just major tornadoes. We had lots of tornadoes on that day. The EF5 that moved through northern Marion County, Hackleburg. You see the kind of damage, devastation through Tuscaloosa, Birmingham, Pratt City, Pleasant Grove, Concord. The same tornado moved through parts of St. Clair County into same storm-produced tornadoes around Neely Henry. We saw southern Cherokee County areas that were impacted by the Goshen tornado, Shoal Creek area, and then there was damage with the one that went through Coleman, EF3 tornado, the one that went through Cordova, and then we saw again those morning tornadoes, Cahaba Heights areas that were impacted. It was just one after the other. It seemed like every time we saw a storm develop, it became a tornadic thunderstorm. So what we want to do right now, we're talking a lot about April 27th, looking back on that particular day as it all unfolded for us here at WBRC Fox 6. And Mickey also checks in right now, sharing some stories along with Matt Daniel, who was also observing what was all unfolding at the time.
Well, Mickey, you know, 11 years ago on this day, that's a day everyone remembers, unfortunately.
Yeah, I actually kind of dread this anniversary. It was just so traumatic for everyone. You know, if you've lived or worked here for any length of time, and you've done that, been here for a long time, it's just to see this happen to so many folks. It just cuts your heart. I mean, it's really hard to think back on that. We had 62 tornadoes in Alabama on April the 27th. 29 tornadoes in central Alabama alone that we see in this graphic behind us. Nearly 2,000 injuries, 254 people lost their lives, and we've just never ever seen anything like this.
Yeah, and what was so crazy about this event was the models that we look at to forecast. They were showing this about a week out. Like, we knew something bad could happen, and each day, unfortunately, just got more confidence, unfortunately, that it was going to get worse and worse.
And we had from the Storm Prediction Center, back then they did it a little differently. They gave us was it a high risk?
Yeah, it was like a standard slight, a moderate, and then a high risk.
And we were in that high risk category, and that's something we had rarely seen, you know? So I tell you what, I was working that morning, and when a system came through, we really didn't think it was going to be that bad in the morning hours. It was more geared into the afternoon. That's typically when you have more instability.
Right.
But that morning, we had a system come through, and I remember the Cahaba Heights area was just hit hard by, it turned out to be an EF3 tornado, but several tornadoes involved in that, and caught us by surprise, really.
Yeah, and that was the toughest part about this event. It was two things. It was
Yeah.
the overnight into the morning and then that afternoon tornado outbreak. So a lot of people woke up that morning with a lot of issues. And I want to show you this graphic up here showing those tornadoes on April 27th. And this is the morning round. And this was what we called a line of storms, a QLCS. And these storms produced some strong winds and also tornadoes. So if you look at those little yellow tracks, not a lot on this map for the first round, but those produced EF3 tornadoes in parts of Mississippi and also in parts of West Alabama where that line just pushed through. There's a lot of spin, a lot of instability, and a lot of people lost power just from that first round, Mickey. So
Yeah.
some people may have thought, you know, this is it. This was the round. That's it, right?
Yeah, and I remember sitting in the weather center, and I had a coworker there. Well, I actually called a guy in. I believe his name was Fred Gossage, and he was pointing out a cell in Mississippi. It was just a little speck on radar, and we were watching, and he said, "Hey, this is the one. This is the one," and that's the one that ended up going into Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, so we had a little bit of a break that morning. Sunshine came out. You know, some people may have thought, oh,
That's a bad thing.
for that day, it was a horrible thing because that produced all that energy to intensify those supercells as they were beginning to form. But yeah, we were watching Mississippi, storms starting to fire up, moving to West Alabama, and these things like instantly exploded.
And I ended up going home, and I watched in horror, as everyone, so many people did, that tornado live in Tuscaloosa, and it was so massive, and it was coming through, and you knew people were dying.
Yeah.
You knew with that coming through that people, and you were helpless. There was nothing you could do about it. And I wasn't on the ground. I went to sleep that night, came back in the next morning. I went to Tuscaloosa. There were people coming out of their homes in shell shock, just in shock. Everything was wiped out like a steamroller had come through and just smushed it all or raked it all away. And it was shocking for me, but then to see the people coming out of their homes like, what happened? They're asking me what happened.
Yeah.
It's just words can't, yeah.
Exactly. Here's the graphic showing you what happened that afternoon of all those intense tornadoes that fell and produced all that damage. So those supercells formed in Mississippi and spread into our area where that high risk, it verified unfortunately. You start seeing those oranges, that's EF3s, the reds, EF4, and even those intense, extremely rare EF5s.
And that's when we saw it through Hackleburg and places like that, but just everywhere. And the problem was there were such huge tornadoes, and they were on the ground for so long. You know that one in Birmingham that comes through Birmingham, it actually jumped up over Birmingham, part of Birmingham, and then went back on the ground because we saw it headed towards, you know, looking out from Tower Cam and looking outside, we saw the clouds but it just missed downtown Birmingham.
Yeah, it was crazy. I was in Georgia at the time tracking these storms, so I was watching everything that was happening here, and I was like you. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing.
Yeah.
It felt like you were in this weird science fiction movie.
Yeah, it almost didn't look real.
Yeah, so just tracking that. Actually, where I was living at, there was a EF1 tornado that struck about 5 or 6 miles south of where I was, but I remember I was worried at that point. But it was just a crazy day. You know, these kind of events aren't normal. Very rare to see these kind of things where all the ingredients lined up to produce all that damage. But, you know, our thoughts and prayers are out to all those people impacted from those storms, lost life, got injured. It was just a crazy day.
And we have a talented videographer and editor, David Kelly. He put together the April 27th storm footage available on DVD. To this day, I haven't been able to watch it. Just the trauma of all that. Of course, it pales in comparison of the people that actually went through it. But I tell you what, our hearts were so with you that day and continue to be. And that's what makes our job so serious.
And the last thing I want to put on this event, on a little bit of a lighter note, is just the incredible, the atmosphere of the people after the storms, the community, going, you know, everyone was working together to help everyone out.
And they're still doing it. I mean, Bo Bikes, Bama, all that stuff.
And it was just incredible to see it. Everyone was working together after this horrible event. So I guess you could say that was the positive part.
Yeah, and it always is. It always is whenever this happens. But tough to look back, but it helps us to prepare and look forward.
Well, yes, and I'm just glad that we're finishing out this month. Nothing like that.
Yeah, days after the tornadoes struck our area, JP and I traveled all around the state to several of these areas that were heavily impacted. I'll never forget a volunteer for the Red Cross from California at a station. There was a site for drop-off supplies in St. Clair County near Ragland, and she said the turnout from the folks in this community is just incredible. Neighbors helping neighbors, and it was just a time, every area you could think of, we had impacts in areas that were in rapid recovery and first response. All right, what I want to do right now is we'll be right back coming up, but I want to show you what we have coming up on the show here on First Alert Weather Extra. We're going to talk with Fred Hunter. He shares his story about being inside the tornado. We talked to Fred moments before the tornado struck the building he was inside of, and I'm going to talk more with Mickey, and then will we see some storms on the horizon, any severe weather in the future? We'll check in on some of the long-range data coming up. The Next Big Thing gives you a heads up days ahead of the next big storm system. The Next 24 gives you the most accurate and updated look at tomorrow. And the Next 60 gives you a 60-minute advantage against Mother Nature. Knowing what's next, days, hours, or minutes away, this is why we First Alert.
When we declare First Alert Weather Day, it's all hands on deck. We're on your side and in your hand with the First Alert Weather app. While Wes and the rest of the team track changes moment to moment, the app keeps you prepared and safe with video and alerts for your neighborhood. And if the power goes out, no worries, you can stream us anywhere. It's easy and it's always on. Stay ahead of Alabama weather. Just scan and tap and have the First Alert Weather app. This is why we First Alert.
On Good Day Alabama, we treat severe weather with the highest priority. It's more than just meteorologists. Everyone plays a part. Having more reporters in more places takes you beyond the First Alert, showing you the impact that we see on radar. We're live in your neighborhood when you need us. On air, online, and on the app. That's the advantage of having the most reporters on your side. That's the advantage of Good Day Alabama.
Our lives revolve around planning for what's next, like the next ball game.
One hot dog with ketchup? It's the same with weather. That's why we're on your side with the next big thing, the next 60, and the next 24. Knowing what's next, days, hours, or minutes away.
This is why we First Alert. Who puts ketchup on a hot dog?
Getting live breaking news and local updates has never been easier. That's because we're on your side with the WBRC streaming app. Need updates between newscasts? You can catch up quick here. And when we're live on TV, we're live here too. Just search WBRC on your Roku, Amazon Fire, or Apple TV. WBRC Fox 6 News is on your side.
Well, our very own meteorologist Fred Hunter had a chance to catch up. Actually, first off, Brian Henry. We're going to check in with Tuscaloosa and hear from Brian Henry, who had a chance to check in with Mayor Walton Maddox, just looking back as how it all unfolded that day and how the mayor handled all the events in the recovery mode after the tornado moved through Tuscaloosa.
$500 million. That's the amount of damage the tornado inflicted citywide 11 years ago. $100 million worth of damage to the city's infrastructure.
Now, certainly there were moments where hope seemed very fleeting.
And it fell on the shoulders of Tuscaloosa Mayor Walt Maddox to somehow, some way overcome it with grit and courage.
You know, the future seemed very dark indeed, but you always felt like Tuscaloosa was going to do this.
The mayor had just started his second term when all hell broke loose. 12% of the city wiped off, 53 deaths.
But certainly nothing can compare to April 27th, and nothing has since.
Maddox admitted he had reached a breaking point 2 days later, just before doing a live interview with one of the major networks.
The death, the destruction, and I really thought, you know what, I'm out. But then in my earpiece, they started counting down to the interview, and we had to keep going.
But through it all, hope never faded away because of what he remembers on a street corner just hours after the storm.
That early the next morning, I went home to get a change of clothes, and I remember seeing a Northport police officer working one of our intersections, and for some reason that really touched me because I realized we weren't alone.
Not alone in the mess, and what a mess it was. But since that time, there's been a resurgence to the tune of $1.1 billion in the recovery zone.
Of that, the city's investment's been about $130 million.
11 years later, healing, recovery, and the sense Tuscaloosa took it on the chin. and came out on the other side stronger. In short, the city became a profile in courage and resiliency.
All right, and Fred Hunter was in Tuscaloosa at the time and shares his story of being inside the tornado as it crossed Colusa Avenue.
Well, here we are in Tuscaloosa again, 11 years to the day later, and quite a difference. A beautiful April 27th, and 11 years ago today, the situation was anything but. This is where I was located at the time. This was the home at one time of the Emergency Operations Center, which was totally destroyed. One of the first major buildings hit here in Tuscaloosa on that April 27th. Of course, this wasn't the first tornado that had threatened the area. That morning, in fact, we had had tornadoes to come through East Tuscaloosa County, and then I recall being on the campus at the university doing a live shot at noon that day. The students, who of course were all getting ready for finals, had lost electricity from the storms that came through on that April 27th morning, and several of them had stopped and asked, are we expecting any more bad weather? Well, of course, the answer was yes, and this is where I first spotted the tornado from out back of the Emergency Operations Center. I recall listening to Wes Wyatt, who was on the air right that moment, saying that the tornado was headed directly for the Tuscaloosa Police Department, which is off to my right here. But at that moment, I saw that the storm had turned and was able to contact a producer and say that we need to go on the air with this right now because the storm is headed for downtown Tuscaloosa. Indeed, that's where a lot of the damage was done. Of course, the tornado went on through Holt and Alberta City, doing damage along the way and eventually moving on over into Jefferson County. But quite a difference. Still get a little bit of a bad feeling when I come here on April 27th, but certainly the weather has improved and we are hoping for brighter days ahead. Reporting from Tuscaloosa on this April 27th, I'm meteorologist Fred Hunter, WBRC Fox 6 News, on your side.
All right, and coming up, we'll check in with Mickey Ferguson share some more stories about the impacts of the morning storms that we were tracking. Plus, we're going to check in on the next chance of rain and storms, talk about the long-range outlook on possible severe weather here locally. That's all coming up in First Alert Weather Extra.
Every morning on Good Day Alabama, we know the news that matters the most to you is the news that hits closest to home.
And we know that to tell the best story means going to where the story is. That's why having more reporters in more places is so essential.
Giving you more local stories that impact your family, your school, and your safety.
On air, online, and on the app. That's the advantage of having the most reporters on your side. That's the advantage of Good Day Alabama.
I hear from people all the time with questions about healthcare, their insurance, and the safety of certain treatments. I'm Morgan Hightower, and I investigate these stories because if I were being taken advantage of, or if my family couldn't get the help they needed, I would want to know how to take action. That's why WBRC Fox 6 News investigates. We're on your side, getting answers, keeping you informed and safe. Contact us when you need a team on your side.
Get pinpoint locations down to your street level on the First Alert Weather app. You can download by searching WBRC in your app store. That's accuracy you can plan on.
I hear from people all the time having problems with their landlord or worried about being ripped off by a bad business. I'm Josh Gann, and I investigate stories like these because if I had questions about protecting my finances or how to save more money, I would want the best advice available. That's why WBRC Fox 6 News investigates. We're on your side getting answers, keeping you informed and safe. Contact us when you need a team on your side.
Get First Alert weather and breaking news. Follow us on Twitter. Search at WBRC News.
Get First Alert weather and breaking news. Follow us on Facebook. Search at WBRC News.
Well, of course, today we're remembering April 27th, and I want to bring Mickey Ferguson in. Mickey, I'll never forget, you and I were here the morning, that first round of storms as it moved through the area. It was just amazing how quickly that all evolved and happened that morning. I mean, what do you remember from the start of that day?
Well, I might be wrong, Wes, but I don't really remember any warnings about that. It kind of caught us by surprise. We really weren't expecting that initial morning round, and it caught me by surprise. I mean, we were there for everybody, and we were letting them know what was going on as best we could, but we were really thinking the main line of storms were going to come through later on that afternoon.
Yeah, I remember that morning we were talking about areas to the north and west. It seems like we often say areas north and west could see a strong to severe storm sneak in, but that line developed, and it was just amazing. I just remember how quickly that moved across from west to east across the area. It seemed like in no time.
Yeah, I really thought they were going to declare it a derecho the way it moved across, and it just came through Cahaba Heights. I think it ended up being like a EF3 that came through there that they determined. But man, that really wiped out, gave a brand new landscape to the Cahaba Heights area that morning.
It sure did. I mean, you can go through there today and just can tell with the tree line, it's all changed. And I know for the longest time on 459, you could see where the trees were toppled there crossing over towards the Liberty Park right there. Still today, you can see some of those trees that are snapped off. I remember, Mickey, that morning, one of the reporters from the Tuscaloosa News called, and we had a lot of folks calling us that morning asking about what happened that morning, what's going on, what's to come. And he had mentioned, he said, hey, looks like you guys missed the timing on this. This happened a little bit sooner than what you expected. I said, no, the next show is about to begin.
Yeah. And I remember, I don't know if it was that old weather office, Wes. It was that small quarters, and we were there with, a couple of volunteers too, but we had a bunch of weather geeks in the room. And we were watching this little speck on radar coming out of Mississippi, and we were all looking at it saying, that's the one, that's the one. And I remember that moment, and that ended up being the massive tornado that hit downtown Tuscaloosa.
Well, Mickey, I mean, you're so familiar with this state, obviously covering weather for as many years as you have, and it's amazing to me, so many storms and tornadoes that you see move through West Alabama, and like the one we saw, the EF4 that went through Tuscaloosa, Jefferson County, and then ultimately into East Alabama. It's amazing how many tornadoes we see that impact places like Tuscaloosa that end up impacting parts of Etowah, Calhoun, and Cherokee counties.
Yeah, it was an amazing day, Wes. It's one of those days you never forget, and true, I wasn't impacted, of course, to the extent of people who lost everything, lost family members, loved ones, property, family, homes that have been there for generations. But I saw the shock on people's faces the next day down in Tuscaloosa. I was covering the morning, and the shock on their face. One guy asked me what happened, and it looked like a giant bulldozer had just raked everything down the road, and there was just foundations, and that was about it, Wes. To this day, I've not been able to watch that special we put together about the outbreak. David Kelly produced it. It did a wonderful job out here, but I just can't even watch it.
Yeah, the April's Fury. And it's certainly an event. It's a generational event, once in a lifetime kind of situation, as we call it. But it serves as a reminder, as that documentary does, Mickey, of what can happen.
Yeah, it's amazing. Hopefully that will never happen again, not to that magnitude. I sure hope it doesn't in my lifetime, because I certainly don't want to see it again. And but yeah, especially when we have. They had a different grading system then. I think they had a high risk, the SPC. They didn't have it enhanced back then, I'm not sure. But
right.
It's pretty rare we get a high risk. When something like that happens, and we're thinking long track tornadoes, these EF3s, EF4s, EF5s, man, that's life-changing. That's life-changing.
I've been to those scenes, Mickey, and you know all too well. I know here the most recent time you were down in Shelby County there with that Eagle Point tornado, but you get to these scenes and you just see the real impacts. And I just can't describe the emotion, the feelings, you know, when you see these sort of things. And to now we've got all these cameras, and like that one camera view we had in Tuscaloosa, to actually see that tornado moving through these areas. And at the same time, what was crazy about the entire thing is we had tornadoes that were happening while the ones moving through Tuscaloosa, Jefferson County. We had another major tornado that was moving through Hale and Bibb counties. And then, of course, the EF5, that was in Hackleburg earlier that day.
Yeah, and a lot of them we couldn't watch live. And I tell you, Wes, it was just it was like a horror movie. It was like a surreal moment with that massive tornado coming through Tuscaloosa, and you knew people were dying. You knew by watching that people were dying, and everyone was helpless. No one could do anything except just watch. It looked like something. It didn't even look real. If it was a movie, it didn't even look real.
I'm with you. I mean, just the first scenes of that tornado we saw from our camera there in downtown Tuscaloosa, once I saw that, I was like, this is surreal. And you know, there was a tornado captured like that on camera back in 2000 that went through that area, and I just never would have dreamed I'd seen something like that again in my lifetime. And you know, moving through the downtown area on that day, but to know, as you mentioned, what's going on in those moments, and all we could do was pray, get the word out. And that's a tornado on an entirely different level. What really amazed me, Mickey, is driving some of the paths and where these tornadoes crossed. I mean, the damaged paths, it was as far as you could see, toppled trees. It's almost like the entire storm itself, the mesocyclone, was just sitting on the ground. I mean, these tornadoes were so massive.
Well, it left a scar across the face of Alabama. It certainly did. And it scars, you know, we sure won't forget.
All right, Mickey. Well, just wanted to share some thoughts with you. Certainly, you don't need to say the year. Just say April 27th. It will forever be a benchmark when we're talking about a risk of severe weather around here. But, Mickey, great talking to you today. And we're going to have some more coming up, some more stories as we remember April 27th, 2011, as we continue on First Alert Weather Extra.
Getting live breaking news and local updates has never been easier. That's because we're on your side with the WBRC streaming app. Need updates between newscasts? You can catch up quick here. And when we're live on TV, we're live here too, giving you more ways to get caught up with everything happening where you live. Plus, exclusive videos from your First Alert weather team. It's easy to use and it's free. Just search WBRC on your Roku, Amazon Fire, or Apple TV. WBRC Fox 6 News is on your side.
You've got enough to worry about every day. That's why the First Alert Weather Team is on your side, so you can plan with confidence and take the worry out of weather. With exclusive First Alert AccuTrack, we pinpoint storms before they arrive. And with Weather Every 6, you are always informed. Alabama's weather changes fast, but we're working even faster, updating and alerting you first. We know your plans are important. This is why we First Alert.
Every morning on Good Day Alabama, we're on your side, trying to get you where you're going safely. First Alert Traffic updates you on slowdowns and gives you alternate routes. Having more reporters covering the roads you drive on gives you even more info to help you know more about why it happened and when it will be cleared. On air, online, and on the app. That's the advantage of having the most reporters on your side. That's the advantage of Good Day Alabama.
I get calls and emails
All right, looking at that 7-day forecast here, we have warmer temperatures in the 80s, chance for showers and storms, as you can see there into next week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. We're going to be tracking some scattered showers and storms. Not seeing a major severe weather risk here, but there will be that risk for some intense lightning and gusty winds. I want to bring in meteorologist Jill Gilardi because, Jill, you know, looking at some of the long-range data here, we're seeing some indications that we're still going to have to watch out for the possibility of maybe some active weather on past next week.
Yeah, we're getting into that warmer time of year, a little bit more unstable, so it's kind of summer-like. So we're looking beyond the 7-day always to see if anything catches our eye. And certainly what catches our eye going into next weekend is look at all that instability. So we may not be talking like tornado threat, but could there be very large hail or damaging winds if we see storms develop and that kind of instability? And so this is something we'll be keeping a watch on and keeping you updated right here in Weather Extra with the Beyond the 7-Day segment.
All right there, Jill, and we're certainly, still going to have to watch those conditions here as we continue. It's still springtime. We have to watch well on into May, and next week and again this weekend, that chance for showers and storms coming back. I'll have more in our forecast tonight. Be sure to check in with us at 9, 9:30, and 10 for updates this evening on WBRC Fox 6 News.
not have the person's picture on it. Is that okay?